Hi guys, how's it going? Ivano here with a new guide. This one is targeted at newer players, and today we're going to be talking about the Madness Sorcerer, or Balance Sage if you play Republic. Now Madness Sorcerer, if you've seen my tier list videos, you will know that this is currently one of the top 3 specs in the game. Its strengths include being incredibly easy to play. Honestly, you can do well with this class even if you only use 2 buttons. It's probably the tankiest or second tankiest spec in the game right now. You really need to try hard to die on this class, and if you have a healer, then you're pretty much invincible. Also, you have Force Barrier, which actually makes you invincible, so that's nice. Madness is one of the best tank killers in the game, having a lot of internal damage. Madness also has a plethora of roots and slows, and will just ruin the day of any melee player that wants to play the game. On the side of weaknesses, honestly, I had a hard time finding anything. It doesn't really have much. The only weakness I would say is that with the build that I'm going to be recommending today, again, which is targeted more at newer players in PvP, it doesn't have the best burst. And the burst that it has, even if you go for an alternate setup that I might discuss later, you will need a couple of global cooldowns to set it up, so it's not the best class for target switching and quickly bursting down an unguarded target. But other than that, a great spec, so let's get into how to play it. What you need to know about Madness, to be honest, is not that much, which is exactly what makes it great for beginners. Key abilities of the class include Creeping Terror, which is a dot that comes with a baked-in root. Looks like this, and is going to be the majority of your damage. Second key ability, Death Brand, which is the single target replacement that was added in the Legacy of the Sith for the Death Field ability. Yeah, as I already said, Death Brand only does damage to a single target, but it heals you for a lot more. And because of a passive, it will also apply a slow to your target. That slow has the possibility of renewing itself and is currently broken in PvP. So the 50% chance that the slow will renew itself. For me at least, it feels a lot higher. It even persists after death. So, in some cases, your targets can be slow, they can miss the respawn because of it. It does a lot of damage and it's just incredibly annoying. So Death Brand, definitely take this one. It is one of the strongest abilities in the game right now. Also heals you for a ton. Next key ability, they come baked together. Force Lightning is a key ability because of the tactical that we will discuss in a second. But yeah, Force Lightning, the dream of being the immortal Sith Emperor and just shooting lightning from your fingertips. It's definitely one of the key ability of the class. Also gives you a crit buff, regenerates your force. It's great. And of course, if you fully channel your Force Lightning, you will receive Wrath, which is a passive proc that really also is one of the key things that you need to know about Madness. So basically just channeling Force Lightning gives you these 4 stacks of Wrath. And if you have 4 stacks, then your Demolish or Lightning Strike will become instant, deal a lot more damage, and consume half the force. So definitely important that you know about this proc. You don't need to worry too much about it because you will pretty much always have it since your rotation really revolves around spamming that juicy Force Lightning. But yeah, it's one of the key things of the class. On the side of Legendary Implants for Madness, we are going to be running Gathering Storm package, which just gives you a bunch of damage every time you activate Force Speed. And then also, most importantly, 20% more damage on all attacks while Polarity Shift is active. The second Legendary Implant that I recommend is Unmatched Haste. I almost never change those two, they're just really good. Again, Unmatched Haste gives you longer Polarity Shift, which synergizes with your Gathering Storm package. And it also makes it so every time you use Force Speed, the cooldown of Polarity Shift is reduced, which just adds to the overall synergy. So those two are great, take them all the time. On the side of tacticals, you have 2 options. For most players, I would recommend going Tempest of Row, especially with the single target build that I'm recommending here. But there is an alternative AoE build that you can run with Killing Field to hit those juicy 20k DPS games. We can go into it later. For now, if you're a new player and you only have the tech frags to buy one tactical, I would definitely recommend Tempest of Row. How does Tempest of Row work? Well, you can read the description for yourself, but it works like this. Makes it so that if you apply Creeping Terror to your target, and then afterwards spam that Force Lightning, it will trigger your Creeping Terror again and deal additional damage. So this is our Creeping Terror. Normally it ticks every 3 seconds. But if I shoot Force Lightning, we will get additional dot ticks that you can see here. And just these two abilities, Creeping Terror and Force Lightning, because of the Tempest of Row tactical, will already do something like 20k DPS if you keep spamming it on a single target. So to demonstrate that here, we are simply going to be using Creeping Terror followed by Force Lightning. And look at my DPS meter. You can see it climbing 17k. I'm getting those Tempest of Row procs. And you can see I have good crit luck right now, and I'm at 22k DPS. Don't forget to renew the dot as it falls off on the target. But always make sure you highlight your dots. If you don't know how that works, I recommend that you check out my other video on how to set up your interface. But yeah, long story short, just with this 2-button rotation, you are going to be looking at over 20k DPS. Very nice. Next up, we're going to be talking about the gear for Madness. As for all characters on DPS currently, just run the normal Thursian PvP gear, or you can get the mods from Hide and Seek if you have that quest. On the side of stats, Madness does not get an alacrity bonus, so I would recommend you go for at least 2200 alacrity to reach the 1.4 GCD, and put the rest in crit. Madness, of course, exclusively deals yellow damage or force damage in that case, so you do not need accuracy in PvP at all. Moving on to the build, you are going to be running with Deathbrand, as I already said, one of the most broken abilities in the game right now. Slows your target, does damage and heals you, it kind of just does everything, and it also puts a death mark on your target, which will amplify your dots, so also makes you do more damage. What more could you want in an ability? Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention it's also internal damage, so it will do full damage against tanks. Next up, you're going to be running Cloud Mind. Cloud Mind is one of your best defensive cooldowns. 25% damage reduction is really strong. And even though it only lasts 6 seconds, the cooldown of 45 seconds means that you will have very high uptime on this damage reduction here. The other rotation I was mentioning earlier would employ Plague Master. That theoretically does more damage and has better burst, but then again, you're going to be squishy, and for PvP, if you're going to be playing against competent players that can target you, you definitely want to run Cloud Mind. Next up, we are going to be taking Downfall at level 39 just for a little bit more single target damage. Level 43 Corrupted Defense, I cannot stress enough how important it is to take Corrupted Defense. It might sound nice to go for unlimited power, right? Yeah, 10% mastery endurance sounds great, and this does work in war zones, but 5-minute cooldown is simply too long. The lower cooldown on force speed is also nice. You can take it if you want to farm maximum damage, but really Corrupted Defense is one of the most overpowered utilities in the game right now, simply because you will always have it up, and it's a passive 15% damage reduction. So there's not many specs in the game that can be as tanky as Madness and basically get 15% DR for free. But coupled with Cloud Mind and some of the other talents that you can take, this just makes Madness incredibly tanky. So always go for Corrupted Defense. It's simply OP. Up here you have a couple of options. Force mobility is nice in PvP. We really like to be mobile. We anyway have to stand a lot for casting our Force Lightning. So yeah, if you can make your Force Leech while casting while on the move, this is always good. But theoretically, you can take the 3% additional damage reduction. There's also nothing wrong with that, but this is what I run. Up here, I would say you have at least two options. I personally run Surging Speed. I think it's also one of the strongest talents in the game right now. 5 seconds less cooldown on Force Speed is good. Less cooldown on Force Barrier, which is your big invulnerability cooldown, is also great. Makes your Force Speed last longer, which means your damage buff from your Legendary Implant lasts longer. And it gives you 100% movement speed during Polarity Shift, which is just insane. I mean, you can kite anyone with this. You're going to be the fastest guy in the game. So yeah, just take this. Surging Speed is really good. And don't forget the last sentence, Force Speed cooldown is finished after barrier ends. So you can Force Speed. Should you get pulled back, you're going to barrier, and then you afterwards can speed again. So Surging Speed, in my opinion, is really OP. But if you're going to be playing in Arena and maybe there's not a lot of room to kite, go for Unnatural Preservation and just get that additional 15% damage reduction, which is also really strong. At level 68, you can take Phase Walk. I would pretty much always go for that. There are some more, let's say, optional builds you can run with Vault Rush and a Healing Tactical, but I would not recommend that for new players. Just go with Phase Walk. It's probably your second best defensive. And then finally, Immersion. This one is required. Never go for any of the others. They might sound nice, but Immersion is really needed. It makes it so you can always get out of a tricky situation and makes you immune to slows and roots, which are plenty in this game right now. So much for the build. Now we're going to be talking about the opener, how to do damage, and the priorities that you need to keep in mind when playing Madness Sorcerer. The opener is pretty simple. We're going to make sure we have both of our dots on the target, followed by a Death Brand to amplify those dots. Then we're going to be casting one Force Lightning to get our Wrath proc, followed by Demolish, and then Recklessness with Force Leech. Why are we pairing Recklessness with Force Leech? Well, very simply, Force Leech is our biggest hitter. So we want to maximize the damage, of course, on that. Now you can pop your Polarity Shift before all that to make your dots tick faster and increase your damage right away. Or you can pop it before Demolish. To be honest, the damage difference is not that big. But just make sure that you use it somewhere here. Usually in the opener is a good idea to get that on cooldown as soon as possible. So to quickly show how this works. So you're going to be putting your dots on the target, followed by a Death Brand. You're going to be casting Force Lightning, Demolish, followed by a Force Leech. And that's your opener. Easy 40k DPS opener. Okay, when it comes to priorities, I think the single target one is the most important one to keep in mind. Since we're mostly going to be playing the single target build. For single target, just again, make sure you always have your dots on the target. That is the most important thing for Madness. You want to make sure those are always ticking, because again, the dots will give you passive tankiness, they will give you a couple of other buffs, and your Force Lightning is only really worth it if your Creeping Terror is already on the target. That being said, as I already showed in the beginning of the video, just with Creeping Terror and Force Lightning, you can pretty much already do, 2/3 of your overall maximum damage potential. And adding Affliction by itself, if you're on a single target that's about to die, is usually not worth. So let's say this guy is at 40% and I expect I can kill him. Within the next 10 seconds, I would almost not bother with Affliction. To quickly show that this is the case, you've already seen my previous rotation, Creeping Terror and Force Lightning, roughly 20k DPS. So now if we're going to be doing the same thing, but just adding Affliction in and look at the damage, Creeping Terror, Affliction, and just spam that Force Lightning, and you will see the damage is not much higher. Now it's climbing. Now we're renewing our dots. And we're getting okay crits here. But you see, compared to the 20,000 damage we had before, now we're at roughly 22k DPS. So it's not that much more. So if you want to swap on a target and you need to kill them quickly, sometimes you can drop Affliction. The only thing I would mention about Affliction is that it actually buffs your Force Leech. So, if your Force Leech is off cooldown, in order to really maximize your DPS, make sure that you apply Affliction before your Force Leech. Third priority when it comes to the single target will be Demolish. This is going to be your hardest hitting ability per global cooldown, so per activation. But then your biggest crit, on the summary screen after the game will be Force Leech. Death Brand, I personally have it as the fourth priority. If I will have both up, I will Demolish first and then Death Brand after. But yeah, it's PvP, so depending on the situation, sometimes you might choose to Death Brand before to heal yourself or slow a target. But damage-wise, if you want to maximize your DPS, Demolish will do more. And then finally, we have Force Lightning. I already mentioned it. This will be your main filler, which will proc your Tempest of Road Tactical and just do tons of damage. Now, theoretically, you can use Lightning Strike as well. Lightning Strike is going to be instant and going to be buffed by your Wrath proc. So you see, if you channel your Force Lightning, you will get these stacks of Wrath. And if you have 4, then both your Demolish and your Lightning Strike will be highlighted and will be instant. However, if you're in PvP, I would recommend you don't focus too much on using Lightning Strike at all. Because instead of spending a global cooldown on Lightning Strike, and then another 1.5 global cooldowns on casting another Force Leech to get your next Wrath proc for the next Demolish, I would rather focus on making sure I have Creeping Terror on as many targets as possible. Overall, that will do more damage and will also make it easier for you to swap targets rather than using Lightning Strike. So if there's only one target and you already have all of your dots on them and all of your higher abilities on cooldown, yes, theoretically, then you can use a Lightning Strike with the Wrath proc and then go back to spamming Force Lightning. But in most games, I would not recommend it. If you're playing the AoE rotation, you will use a slightly different build. You will use Death Field instead of Death Brand. And as I already said, you're going to be using the Killing Field Tactical. And if you're going to be using that, then you have exactly 3 priorities. You make sure you get Death Field on as many targets as possible, because your Demolish will spread to all targets affected by your Death Mark, which comes from Death Field. Creeping Terror actually is only the 3rd priority, so once those 2 are on cooldown, again, Demolish, you want to be using it with the Wrath proc from Force Lightning. Make sure those 2 are always on cooldown, but especially make sure that you hit Demolish on as many targets as you can. It does have an 8-meter range, so should be quite easy to hit it on more than one target. But yeah, this will be the majority of your damage. Make sure you make it count. And then again, yeah, Death Field also spreads Affliction, of course. So just because I don't have it in the list here doesn't mean you're not going to be using Affliction. The priority will still be that you get your dots on as many targets as possible, spreading them with Death Field. But the priority does change if you run the Killing Field Tactical. Actually, getting Death Field up and Demolish is more important than spreading these little dots. Simply because Demolish will do so much more damage than Creeping Terror and Affliction in this build. Last but not least, defensive cooldowns, of which Madness has plenty. So when it comes to defensive, typically the first thing I want to use if I get hit, and even the first thing you should do before you start the match, is applying your bubble, aka static barrier, to yourself. In Madness, you can see this heals you for roughly 4,000 hit points every second, which is 1% of your total health. This is incredibly strong. I mean, 4k HPS, that's more than some healers do in some war zones that I've been part of. Of course, this heal only lasts while your barrier is intact. So if you're going to be hit, what I would recommend sometimes is kite away, hide somewhere behind a corner, get your barrier up, and get those juicy heals, heal up, make sure you don't get hit. Next up, I would be using Resurgence. Resurgence will give you a nice immediate heal. Resurgence will also give you 30% armor rating, which is nice and increases your damage reduction. Once I've used those 2, typically I would go for Unnatural Preservation, which is another short cooldown heal. Can crit quite highly, so it's a good ability. You can use it. It's off the global cooldown, so there's literally no reason not to use this more often. Number 4, something that a lot of people wait too long to use, is the Warzone Adrenal. Now, you're going to get those if you play PvP from your reward crates. It is 15% damage reduction for 15 seconds, which is really good. You want to make sure you pop this early and not when you're already at 30% HP. After that, I use Cloud Mind. Cloud Mind, again, gives you 25% damage reduction, which is really good. Only for 6 seconds, so you need to make sure you kind of time this, but again, don't wait too long. It's better to pop this before you receive the damage than to wait too long and die through it anyway. Number 6 would be the Warzone Med Pack. Gives you a nice 35% HP heal. So always good to use this. Obviously, you don't want to use this if you're at 80%. That's why I typically use my other cooldowns before that. You can use this to outplay if you're, let's say, only facing one opponent and they don't have any of the burst cooldowns ready. They think they can kill you, so they'll follow you around the corner. You can use your Med Pack to quickly heal you. Maybe combine this with an Unnatural Preservation. And all of a sudden you're at 60% health again and you can 1v1 them. If you do that, don't forget to type easy in the chat. Finally, all sorcerers have access to Phase Walk. Phase Walk is a great ability because it allows you to teleport. So it can allow you to get out of a tricky situation, and it's one of the best defensive cooldowns in the game. It only has a cooldown of 60 seconds, aka 1 minute. So make sure you always place this in a location that is within the range. 60 meters range, it sounds like a lot, but make sure you stay within those 60 meters. You can actually reposition your phase walk as well. So I'll quickly show how this works. So let's say I'm putting down my phase walk behind this wall. I can see in the buff here I have phase walk. And on my quick bar I can see I am within range since the skill is lighting up. Now I'm going to be walking over here, and once I get to the 60-meter range, it will be grayed out. So now I'm out of phase walk range. I cannot use it again. Now if I activate my phase walk by accident, I will not be teleported because I'm more than 60 meters away and the skill will be inactive. So sad times. I might have to use my final cooldown here. What you can do, however, if you're out of range, you can put another phase walk down. And let's say I want to walk. I want to swap my phase walk because this is now a better place because the fight has moved over here. I can click off the buff with the right mouse button. Now I can put phase walk again in the new place. Force Barrier, 2 minutes 30 cooldown if you spec into surging speed. And it's of course one of the most iconic abilities in the game. Makes you immune to all incoming damage and negative effects for 8 seconds. You can even live through the fire and hotball with it. It's simply the strongest defensive cooldown. The only thing that counters it is getting pulled by a sorcerer on your team, which is really sad that if that happens. But otherwise, nothing can kill you as long as you have your barrier up. So those are all the defensive cooldowns. Final tips I would have for new Madness players is again, just focus on your very simple key rotation, making sure you have the dots on the target, you get your Death Breath on cooldown to slow the enemies and heal yourself. Casting Force Leech is your hardest hitter, and then just get those Force Lightning, Wrath procs, and keep Demolish on cooldown. Don't worry too much about Lightning Strike, and if you should get damage, just start kiting away, bubbling up, using Resurgence to heal yourself, making sure you have Phase Walk placed. You have a lot of passive DR, so just keep the dots up, keep rooting people with Creeping Terror. You don't want to go into melee range too much. Again, you have 30-meter range on all of your abilities. So make sure you use them. And then I guess one thing I didn't mention yet is, of course, you have Electrocute baseline, which is your 4-second hard stun. It's one of the good things that Sorcerer kept that other classes lost. Electrocute is great. You can always use it. Of course, you also have Overload, which is a knockback that comes with a 5-second root for everyone. It is an AoE ability. Make sure you don't miss this one. Overload will cast in a cone like this. So it should be really easy to hit a large amount of people with it, and it's just incredibly strong. Once you get a little bit more advanced and you're comfortable with playing your own character, you can look at other techniques, such as using your Extrication to pull a teammate out of a sticky situation. Let's say one of your teammates is getting focused and is out of cooldowns. You can use Extricate to pull them over to you. It's also a great ability for sometimes trolling your teammates in hotball and pulling them out of a barrier and into a fire. Finally, Expunge can be used to cleanse yourself from all kinds of negative effects of the mental or force kind. For example, you can use this to cleanse an overload root by another sorcerer on yourself or on your teammates. This can also be used to cleanse the sap of an assassin, so a really useful skill that you can practice once you're a little bit more used to the basic abilities of the class. So that's all I have for today. Hopefully that helped the newer Madness players a little bit. If you have any questions on this, let me know in the comments below, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.